a very strong scream at them, a vocalization, which he said resonated in his chest. Never heard that before. Well, my name is Steve Coles, the Squatch Detective. I'm a licensed private investigator at Notary Public in the state of New York, and I've been a professional investigator since 1988. And in 1998, I read a book entitled The Monsters of the North Woods, which chronicled Bigfoot sightings in my neck of the woods, all within an hour and a half of me, etc. And I got thinking, as a private investigator and a professional investigator, I was like, I wonder if a lot of this is a bunch of bunk. Is there any truth to any of this writing? Because sometimes you dig deeper and you find that things aren't necessarily how they appear, how they seem. So throughout my journey, what I've learned is quite the contrary, that there is something to this mystery. I've had 2 encounters myself, and I've talked to a number of credible witnesses, including police officers, firefighters, scientists. So it really changed my perspective on this whole mystery from when I first got involved. Now, mind you, when I was a little kid, I had, the normal childhood attraction to this, but lost it when I was a teenager and really didn't think about it until 1998.
So you had some encounters yourself. Were those early on in your interest to it, or was it just recent?
No, actually, neither. It actually started. I've been involved in research at approximately 13 years before I had my first sighting, and had a sighting in 2011, had a sighting in 2012, and that's been it. So it's been 11 years since I've had a sighting.
Well, tell me about those individually in detail. The 2011, when your very first sighting, what happened?
Well, at that point in time, I had been very well involved in researching a particular area because it had a number of aggressive encounters, and I got my team, and by that time, I have developed my site, squatchdetective.com, which launched in January 1, 2006. I started a podcast in September of 2006, and had been investigating cases, some on a national basis, some on, and of course, the boots on the ground on the local basis. And in 2000, very early on in my career, this encounter with a man and his wife going into this particular area of the forest, and he was very inclined. He had been there all his life. He grew up there, and as his wife and him ventured off the trail, about 40 minutes or so after they had done such, they had encountered a very strong scream at them, a vocalization, which he said resonated in his chest. And being up there and familiar with the animals up there, he had never heard that before in all his number of years. So he decided, let's get out of here. And as they were leaving, this thing continued to scream at them. And he started seeing the shadow of it walking from tree to tree to tree, kind of escorting them out of the area. And it lasted for about a quarter of a mile till he got out, and then eventually got in the car and they left. So to me, that was very territorial. So I started researching that area in 2000, and 2010 had gotten a lot of good vocal stuff, a lot of high strangeness, like leaving a recorder in the camp and hearing something walking around the camp. And this is an abandoned camp that we've moved on and just set the camp up and left to go do our thing, and something is walking around the camp. So very, very unusual stuff. So in 2011, and let me just think about this. So in 2011, I had my team up there in October of 2011, obviously. And we had been out for a few hours, and people were hearing things, the walking around. And every time we'd go to check it out, it would move farther off into the forest. So anytime they would hear something, they would move out, it would move back deeper into the forest. Always about 20, 30 minutes later, it would come back. So they would go back out and it would move back in. And this was going on. And they were hearing stomps, like, something stomping their foot. So, it was very bizarre. So we're all in our campfire at our campsite, our base camp. And we had this raging fire going. We're eating. After we debriefed there first, it's our break. We're going to go out in a little bit. And we're all kind of laughing and talking. And I'm like, my headlamp's kind of dim. I'm going to go out and get some batteries for my headlamp. So I walk out the 75 feet maybe to the vehicle, which is on a dirt road, rural dirt road. There's nobody up here. Go into my vehicle, get the batteries, throw them in my pocket. I'm going to light up a cigarette. I take my flashlight up and I look to the downhill is actually to the north. And I'm looking there, and that up until then was where a lot of the other activity had occurred. I turn around and I shine my light up south, and there standing next to a utility pole is this 8-foot silhouette of a bipedal creature. Its eyes are reflecting dark orange, reddish to me, back at me, and I can see the thing blinking at me. So a period of time passed. I shook my light and it walked into the woods. Immediately called my crew out, my first ops team out, told them what had happened. So they, my ops team 1 had a videographer. He immediately started videotaping me, telling me what had just occurred. They start looking around. They find actually the scuff where it had walked in. And while they're doing that, you can hear the base camp yelling on the radio, "Hey, you know what? We got something really, a lot of movement coming over here from the southwest side of the camp," which is where it had gone off to and was walking around the camp, going back deeper into the forest. So that was my first encounter. My second encounter, conversely, occurred a year later. And it was actually in between shooting with Nat Geo called Paranatural, which aired in the Asian and Australian markets and rebranded here in the States for Destination America's Monsters and Mysteries Unsolved. And the first day we got up there, it was raining and miserable. And we had set up a lot of, we set up our stuff. We were collecting a lot of birch. And Nat Geo came in. We were like, "Listen, we just drove 10 hours because we were coming from the other side of the state at that point because we had been at a conference." And it was me, an investigator, a researcher from Georgia, and 2 researchers, a married couple from Ohio. So, like I said, we had set the camp up. Nat Geo came in. We said, "Listen, we'll only do interviews. We're not going to go out tonight. We're exhausted." And they're like, "That's fine. We'll come back tomorrow." And so Nat Geo did their quick interviews with us, met us, and then they scampered on off. So we had a few hours before we were going to hit the hay and go to bed. And, Jeff, who was the Georgia researcher, because of the rain, had kept his pillow and blanket in his vehicle. He didn't know how his new tent was going to hold up to the rain, and he didn't want a sopping wet pillow and blanket just in case he had to sleep in his vehicle. So about 11 o'clock at night, he goes out, grabs his pillow and blanket out of his Jeep, comes back in, says goodnight, goes to bed. Now, mind you, the married couple, Melissa, had already gone to bed probably about a half hour prior to Jeff. And now it's just me and Wayne from Ohio, and we're sitting there talking for a little bit. And eventually we decide to knock off. Off we go. At some point, probably I'd say about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, nature calls. I have to use a tree. So I unzip my tent, and mind you, although it had been raining and overcast, there was a full moon that night. So the whole ambiance there is kind of like a very dim night light. And you're sleeping, your eyes are closed, you're in darkness, you're not light blind. And, my eyes were very well adjusted. And like I said, there was a nice, still an ambiance coming from the full moon through the clouds. So I get out and I immediately look to my left and I see a 5.5-foot long reddish brown hair bipedal creature just go, and it ran off into the woods. And my first reaction to it was like, no, I just didn't see that. I just didn't see that. It can't be. Used a tree, went back to bed. The next morning, I'm awoken fairly early by Jeff, the gentleman from Georgia, who was putting his pillow and blanket away and noticed that something behind his Jeep had placed a birch log, a rather large birch log, probably about 4.5 feet long, behind his Jeep, that he would have tripped over the night before to get his pillow and blanket. So that was very strange. And that's when I said, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but this is what I believe I had seen last night. So everybody's getting on high alert and they start looking around, and Melissa and Wayne actually found a track in that area that was 9 inches long by about 4 inches wide. Again, a very wide footprint for a Sasquatch. Sasquatch have very wide prints. That's why they're really Bigfoot. It's because of their width, not necessarily because of their their length, although their length can be very impressive at times too. And yeah, so they had found this 9-inch by 4-inch print, which they cast. And the next night, after we got done filming and things got quiet again, we had our little camp. And that night we all go to bed, and we left a recorder running in the camp that night too. And what you hear, we all go to bed, and then maybe we were in bed maybe about a half hour or so, and then we hear on the hood of the car, boom, like something had slapped its open hand on the car. Not like something small had fallen on the car. This was like a boom, and it was on the car. And you hear me on the audio go, "What the hell was that?" And then I hear Wayne go over in his tent. I heard it, and then I heard Jeff go, "Well, I'm up now." And so that was really some of the strangest that went on after that particular sighting.
And in both cases, you saw more of a silhouette, not necessarily like a detail of face or anything like that.
I saw more detail actually in the smaller one. Like I said, I could tell it was reddish brown hair. The first encounter, the silhouette one, was very tall, lanky. I mean, I could see it I could see the outline of the head and the shoulders. And, I was kind of focused on its eyes because the eyes were blinking at me. It actually had turned once during the encounter, kind of looked behind it. And then, I just froze. And the minute I moved the light, it said, "Okay, I'm out of here." So I think it was trying to assess whether or not I was actually looking at it. And because I put it in the spotlight, again, it's at a distance where you're not going to get much more. And of course, those were the days when I think the flashlight was like 350 lumen. So it wasn't going to really give me a big bright. Now I carry an 1800 lumen flashlight, which is like powerful. I mean, it's like a spotlight. But, and like I said, you could literally see it turn and walk off. You could make out the shadow of it. It was definitely not a quadruped, definitely bipedal. Definitely had these dark orange, reddish eyes blinking at me. And the other, the second one, I could make out much more detail. I could tell it was reddish brown hair because I had that ambient light coming from the moon through the clouds. So I could see it more than just a silhouette. I could actually see dimension on this one now. And it was so fast. By the time I kind of realized what I was looking at, it already profiled and started walking away.
How did you respond to that? Did it make you nervous? Did it excite you? I mean, what were your responses?
So I wasn't really afraid. I mean, I had one of my areas that I have predominantly researched is I'm very big into behavior. I'm a trained forensic interviewer, which means I know I have to understand motive and behavior and the psychology behind behavior. So I started very early on looking at how primates react in their territories and et cetera. And one of the things I learned very early on was that primates of one species rarely attack primates of another species. So at the distance I was, knowing, in both occasions, I had backup. I had people in the camp. I'm sure it observed that primates are naturally smart, so they can be very tactile-like. So it would know that, hey, listen, there's more than one. But I want, and basically, we're just evoking their curiosity. That's why this lone one was watching our campfire that night, because it was October, leaves have dropped. It could see it. We're their television. Primates need mental stimulation. So I wasn't really in fear. I was more in like, holy crap, there's one right there. There it is. And I'm not going to move because if I move, I know it's going to book off. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And I'm like, well, this is a Mexican standoff. And I don't know what I'm just going to shake the light to see what it would do. And it walked off. The second instance was just so fast. It was like I get out of the tent and there it is. And being a juvenile, once I got out of the tent, it was taking off because it had been actually closer to me. I mean, the first sighting was probably about 100 to 150 feet away, somewhere within that range, probably greater than 100 feet, but I would say no more than 150 feet. This one was probably only 50 to 75 feet away. So when it saw me, it was like, oh, I'm close. Bang, out it went. And it was spying on our camp. Now, the same thing in those camps over the years previous, and even the year after, is if you're not in camp every once in a while, there would be a rock throw into the camp. or if it thought nobody was in the camp, you would get a rock throw into the camp. And what I think it was doing in that particular circumstance was trying to elicit some sort of reaction to see if anybody was there. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. Throw a rock in, boom, boom, boom. Okay, it's clear. I can go in. If not, if there's movement around, or hey, what was that? Oh, okay, somebody's there. I'm not going to go any further. And that's the typical behavior we've seen prior to and after of what we believe is going on there. So again, primates are very tactile. Chimps are very tactile. Gorillas, orangutans are very and we are as human beings, and humans are part of the great apes. We are primates. We are great apes. And I always hear that argument, oh, you can't call Bigfoot an ape or a primate. Well, why not? We're primates. We're apes. Technically, if you look at the minutia of the family orders.
So in your research of all of this, you've been doing this a while, but you've got some heavy duty time between here and there, and you probably heard a lot of things too. What's the most amazing thing that you've heard about Bigfoot and some of the encounters that?
Well, there's a difference to me between amazing and realistic. The most amazing thing I can always think is their ability to just be there. There they are watching. Their curiosity is what fascinates me. I mean, I've heard some pretty unrealistic things. Oh, the Bigfoot turned into an orb or jumped into a portal or got into a UFO. But many of those can be explained by science and by psychology in one aspect or another. But the most amazing thing, I think, is their speed. I've seen it myself. They're incredibly fast and good sprinters. I saw that little one just go and it tore off. They obviously have which is strange for a higher primate. There are some lower primates that have a tapetum lucidum, which is the eye, which is the mechanism in the eye that reflects. That's why there's so much eye shine in a lot of the reported sightings. I think their tracks they leave behind, and I've found a few in my day. The structure of them is very consistent and congruent with other tracks. They look a lot like ours, but in many aspects they are very different. A lot of and this is how we tell a lot of misidentified tracks and a lot of hoax tracks is that Bigfoots do not have an arch. They are very flat-footed. They have a mid-tarsal break, and their heel is extremely wide. So when we start seeing, these prints that have arches in them, we can automatically rule them out as if they're within a normal human constraint range. Then we can rule them out as human. We can also rule out things such as consistent toe splay, which every barefoot that hits the ground, its toes vary. So if you find a print line where every toe spread is the same, somebody's using a stamper out there, just stamping them out. And that's one way of telling as well, an easy way of telling. But yeah, they're incredible. Sometimes you'll see a mid-tarsal break in a print present itself. Sometimes you may not. Substrate in New York is very hard and difficult to get prints. So a lot of the prints, the print I had found, was very impressive. I found that in 2006 in that same area after hearing it walking around us and smelling it. People often talk about the smell of a Bigfoot. Yeah, I used to be a medic as well, and I've been in houses where, somebody has been gone for a couple of weeks, and I know what that smells like. This smelled far much worse, and it was just quick. There it was, and there it's gone. At the same time, we could hear something walking around us. Now, people may attribute all these other paranormal aspects to a Bigfoot, but I do not believe in those because number one, why would you're jumping through a portal, you're coming off a UFO? Why would you come here naked if you're so technologically advanced? Why would you not wear any protection against the parasitic climate that has ticks and chiggers and fleas and mosquitoes, which is the number one killer of human beings, since the beginning of the planet due to, virus transmissions and bacterial transmissions. You would have something. If you come from another planet, like some have suggested, you would have to wear breathing apparatus because even though the ecosystems, or the has the proper amount of oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen in the air for something to breathe, you may not be able to breathe that because you have no immunity to the bacteria or the viruses of the planets. So think of us as going to another planet that was exactly like Earth. If we didn't have breathing apparatus, everything we breathe in is going to attack our system because we have no immunity against that bacteria. So there's lots of little things like that people don't understand. If you start doing a deep dive on what some of these more paranormal, they don't make any sense. Not only that, but I think not only the fact that it would be running around naked, but the fact that it smells so bad. I think those are some pretty big factors that this is more than a supernatural being. It's leaving footprints. It's leaving physical evidence behind. It's leaving hair behind. It's breaking trees as it goes through things. It's leaving, like I said, it's leaving footprints. It smells sometimes it doesn't. It's done, at least in my experience, it's done nothing paranormal except run away or walk away.
Why do you think it's so difficult to catch them? They hide very well for such a large animal.
Well, think about it. Number one, if I walked into the woods and I didn't use a gun, how hard would it be for me to catch a deer or a bobcat or anything that's out there? You just wouldn't be able to do it unless you had that gun, put it down. So that's number one. It's not easy to catch an animal in the forest. We are not acclimated to running in the forest anymore. Our many thousands of years of evolution have made us less adaptable to the forests than we used to be. I mean, we used to be hairier than we are now. We used to be a little more broad-shouldered, a little more squat. Our foot structure was even different. So that has changed over the evolutionary period because we don't necessarily hunt like other creatures of the forest do or forage like other creatures of the forest do. So evolutionary, we're not great in the woods. Unless we have a piece of technology such as a firearm or a crossbow or anything like that. Remember, I said earlier, it's very difficult for primates to attack a primate of another species. How many times have we heard the story of a hunter getting one in its rifle sights and just can't pull the trigger? Why? Because it looks too much like us. So that's a big factor. If you try to dart one, let's say we're going to try to dart one, you don't know what dosage this is. I mean, this may be a 600-700 pound animal, but its metabolism may be different. I mean, people talk about, they can tag tigers, but their metabolisms are different than, feline, metabolism is much different than Homo sapien metabolism. And then the final factor you have is you're running after you're running after a primate here. You're not going after a deer or a wolf or a fox or a rabbit. You're going after something that thinks, that can think and forward think. Jane Goodall, many years ago when she was doing her internship with Dr. George Schaller, they wanted to test how forward thinking can a chimpanzee get. And they took a pipe and they put a banana in the middle of the pipe. So it could not reach into and actually grab the banana. It had to problem solve. And they put a broomstick in the room with it to figure, let's see if the chimp can take the broomstick and push the banana out of the pipe. And for 12 days, they got acknowledgement of the broomstick, acknowledgement of the banana in the pipe. And that's it. They didn't have one-on-one. They were just about to give up. And on the 13th day, that chimp walked in, grabbed the broomstick and pushed the banana out in the instant it walked in, which means it had been thinking about that problem while outside of seeing that problem, which consists of abstract thought. So you have something here that we know primates can abstract and think. They can recognize voices. They can recognize items. They can recognize things. And everybody knows if you're trying to sneak around the woods, every animal in the woods gets a little suspicious of that. But if you're acting normally, the ferocious animals like bears and wolves and coyotes, they'll go the other way, or even bobcats, they'll go the other way. Okay, there's too much noise over there. But if you're acting stealthy, puts the Bigfoot on alert, puts the deer on alert, and it puts the predators like, what's that running around? So it's a matter of they're not that hard to just catch because they think.
How intelligent do you think they are?
Well, let's look at the facts. Nobody has seen them create a complicated tool nor use a complicated tool. If they've seen using anything, they're using basic tools, much like a chimpanzee. much like a gorilla, much like an orangutan. I mean, and it's amazing. I mean, if you look at an orangutan, most of your primates will nest on the ground, and they will make their own beds. They will structure, leaf litter they can find and substrate to make a nice, comfortable bed. But here's an interesting thing. Do you know that orangutans actually make pillows and blankets out of stuff? So they do something far advanced, more than the chimpanzees and gorillas. Yet they are added the three great apes, the closest being to us. They're the third in line. So, it's really hard to say exactly how intelligent they are, but, they will, just because something looks like us or kind of walks like us, and they don't really look like us. And I think there is something called anthropocentrism, which a lot of human beings want to necessarily give off to other animals. Like, oh, look, the dog's playing hide and seek with me. No, the dog's not playing hide and seek. He has no concept of hide and seek. Well, we do that with other animals, and we do that with other creatures. So I think people see a Sasquatch and they say, well, it's got to be like us because it walks upright. But if you look at the minutia of things, that's about the only thing in common a Sasquatch has with us, that it does not have in common with all of other primates. The only thing different from a Sasquatch to other primates is it walks upright like us. That does not necessarily make it like us. It has much more hair cover, not us. It has, forward eyes. Well, all primates have forward eyes, large head, a large brain, articulate hands and feet. Well, that's primates. That's not Homo sapiens or humans. The only thing that it does congruent to Homo sapiens is it walks upright.
What do you think of the structures? Any insight on that?
Yeah, if you didn't see a Bigfoot naked, it didn't happen. It's strange, it's bizarre, but we have legions of people going out there going, oh, look, there's Bigfoot. Look at this structure. Well, where's the other supporting evidence? And that's a huge problem. Where's the tracks? Where's hair? Where's scat? A lot of the stuff I see online can be clearly explained with ice storms, especially if you're coming from the Northeast or anywhere there's ice storms. A lot of tree bends. Well, ice, people think you pull a tree back, because a Sasquatch is so strong, it's going to stay like that. It doesn't work like that. And that needs to be secured down and held down for a long period of time. And the truth is that, the Native Americans used to do that. They used to create saddles in trees so they could sit, and they used to tie down trees in a certain way to do that. Nothing can be explained. Like, dead tree falls down, brings fresh tree down. And then after a little while, because this is dead much longer, this tree rots, right? Now you have this bent tree. And people come along and go, oh, that's Bigfoot. No, it's just a tree falling in the forest. And, now there are some exceptions. Like if you find a tree where the top of the tree is in the ground and the root is up, that's interesting, fascinating. But who said Bigfoot made it if there's no corroborative evidence? You can never assume anything unless there's some corroborative evidence. If there's a tree stuck in the ground and look at these prints around here, then I'm more apt to believe it. But unless, we have legions, like I said, we have legions of people that have been kind of led down the wrong path. I think, oh, look at all these tree bends. No, we're not looking at tree bends. You got to act like a hunter, look for tracks and look for tree breaks, but not tree bends or any of the tree breaks necessarily. We see you need to look for patterns of tree breaks where something large has moved through the brush or moved that forest floor aside, just like you would track a deer or any other animal of the woods. Because you know what, human beings, we leave the same exact kind of footprint when we walk through the woods. We have tree breaks and we have forest floor that we have mashed down as we go through it. So we should be looking for something, congruent to that with a Sasquatch, not, oh, look at this tree break, that's a Bigfoot. No, it's not.
What about on all of the audio that you've heard, the vocals and things like that? Did you hear any wood knocks or tree breaks associated with that vocal at the same time?
Not at the same time. There have been, and then again, you have to look at it from a time period. I mean, you don't have a Bigfoot screaming and knocking at the same time, but have there been tree knocks recorded along with audio? Yes, there have been. Personally, I've had some, and I'm only experiencing what I've experienced, because there's a lot of material out on the web that says this and that and the other thing. I can only attest for my own because I was there. In 2010, we had gotten some whoops. We had gotten some rock clacking. Occasionally, we would get a tree knock. And these were all consistent over a period of a night or two, several times, in the fall months. So, is it on the same recording? Yeah. Is it broken down into separate recordings? Yes, as well. That's just the kind of behavior you have. Just recently, in fact, we just aired it on our show for the first time last week, as we got probably one of the best calls we have gotten in a while. And whether it's a Sasquatch or not, I'm not sure, because again, we don't see what's making these things. We don't see what's making a tree knot. We don't see what's vocalizing. So we're on assumption land, and we can't necessarily put up, hey, this is proof of Bigfoot, but we can say, hey, this is interesting. Take a listen. Is it a Bigfoot? Is it not? We don't know, but take a listen. Does it sound like anything else in the woods? Of course, this did not. And I mean, I know my owl calls. I know my sounds of that forest. I've been going up there since 2000 now. So 23 years I've been going into that same research area. I take everything with a trepidation and a disclaimer, because it's not hard for somebody to record somebody else's recording and put it on the web. It's not hard for somebody to take it and change it a little bit. I mean, I've exposed a guy who took a gorilla call. And the funny thing is I found the original file. It's the same file. The only difference is in his file, it sounds a little more with a lot of more white noise going on, because it sounds like he had an air conditioner or a fan going on in the background. And so it sounds slightly different, but you look at the waveform, it's the same exact pattern, just, a little bit different off the decibel range. So, you can compare, so there's people that can do that too. So you have to be very cautious on the web when you're just surfing, looking at certain particular evidence. You got to do your homework, you got to cross check. But as far as audio, anything to say, one other caveat I'd like to say too is that for cold weather, especially when you get down in below freezing and you start getting into 28 degrees, 22 degrees, 10 degrees, trees will pop like tree knocks on their own. And that's because they're expanding and contracting. I mean, I was standing next to a tree that knocked. Actually, it's a pop, but it sounds like just like a tree knock. And I was standing like 30 feet from it. I was like, I look over, I'm like, yeah, there's no Bigfoot there. It's just the cold contracting that, or, contracting that tree, and then, it's something internally lets loose. So you got to be wary of that. So usually if it's above freezing, tree knocks are very, I would say probably 40 degrees and up, tree knocks are very interesting. Below, I'd say 35 degrees and below, they become suspect that it could be this expanding and contraction of the trees.
Do you do calls and whoops and knocks to see if you get a return? You do those in the woods? How often do you do something like that?
Occasionally. Sometimes I'll go in there quiet. Sometimes I will go. I mean, we did a live stream from another location that I was kind of ponytailing off another sighting. I got a sighting report from, I think, 2018 or 2019. And we had kind of tracked where it would have gone. So we decided to go up there one day and do a live broadcast in there. Let's check the area out. So I'm on my own, and we don't tree knock, we don't whoop, we don't do nothing. And within, 10, 15 minutes of me going down the line, something starts walking toward me. And I'm not saying it's a Bigfoot. And I said that right there. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot. This area has bear and it has moose in it. We have done nothing really to discourage that activity. So I'm going to go back. And as I'm going back, this thing keeps coming at me on the side of the forest floor. Eventually, I have my partner, one of my research partners, come down, Mike, and we start walking down, and he catches a glimpse of something in his thermal, but it's real quick. And then we hear off in the distance the tree knock. Well, it's 49 degrees out, or 48 degrees at that particular time. It's not a cold, it's not a heat cold expansion. We weren't tree knocking, so it's doubtful that the human would say, "Oh, there's a bunch of people. Let me hit a tree knock." And, so that was weird. We then go about another 100 yards or so down the road, and we get into an area which is very swampy, and caught right on the audio and the video of the show. Something threw a rock at us, and you could hear it going through the trees and then down beside us. And that was intimidation. I think what it was trying to do was kind of intimidate us to come on, move along. Because the rock came down relatively, I'd say within 2 feet of me, because I could hear it hit the rocks that we were standing on beneath me as it came through the woods. So you look at some of that stuff and you go, wow. But as far as what I do, it all depends on the circumstance. If it's really quiet, nothing happens. All right, let me do a couple of ups, see if something happens. Once in a while I'll tree knock, but it's all like, it's kind of like driving a standard transmission. It's a little bit of clutch, it's a little bit of gas, it's a little bit of brake, it's a shift, so you got to kind of run it like that. Animals are dynamic and people are dynamic too. I mean, every creature of the earth is dynamic. So I kind of laugh sometimes that science wants repeatable experiments on Bigfoot, because you can't always guarantee they're going to be there. You just like you can't always guarantee, as me being an investigator, and I've arrested a lot of people in my life doing what we call organized retail crimes things. I mean, I can't always guarantee that a thief is going to be, he hit last Thursday, at 2:00. I can't guarantee he's going to be back there at Thursday at 2:00 the next week. He may skip that week and go. So it's very dynamic situation. So you have to kind of test the waters once in a while and say, okay, nothing. We're making our presence known. Nothing's going on. Let's try a little something. Again, I think our tree knocks and our calls get them curious. Again, I told you we're their television. So all of a sudden they hear, there's human beings. And the other thing too is primates are naturally curious. So if we start making these sounds, guess what? We hear we're sitting at home and we hear an explosion outside. The dogs, the cats, they'll get under the tables and they'll run away. Us as primates go, hey, what was that? And Sasquatch is no different. So they start hearing stuff, piques their curiosity. They're going to go there to assess the situation. That way they can tactilely think how to deal with it instead of just ignoring it.
What would you advise researchers out in the woods to be most aware of?
I always say that the best, to me, Bigfoot will come and go at their own leisure. You stay alert. That's all fine and good. But the biggest advice I give to anybody going out in the woods is make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you know where you're going. Make sure you have maps. Make sure you have GPS. Make sure you have an emergency blanket somewhere. Make sure you know your way back to your vehicle. Make sure that you know the animals in the area and that you have protection against those animals. Because I would hate to go into the woods blindly with no weaponry in Montana where a grizzly might show up or a mountain lion. So go in prepared. That's the biggest advice, because safety is number one. You don't want to end up on a newsline, man goes into woods looking for Bigfoot, ends up lost and dead, of hypothermia or animal attack. So that's really important. That's probably the more important message I get out to people. Anybody can look. I mean, there is no formula per se that if you do X, Y, and Z, Bigfoot will show up. I have some suggestions and you've heard them, but the biggest thing for going out in the woods is go prepared.
What do you think about this theory that that in the national forest, a lot of people are taken and disappear, and Bigfoot has something to do with that?
I think it's horse pucky. And the reason why is nobody sees Bigfoot taking them. Oh, there's Bigfoot sightings in the park. Well, I bet you there's also deer sightings in the park too, but the deer aren't taking the people either. It's very weak guilt by association sometimes. People go out in national parks unprepared. Something happens, a grizzly bear or a predator gets them, and they get eaten up. They get gobbled up, just like, Bigfoot bodies. People ask me, where are the Bigfoot bodies? Well, they're certainly not buried, because if they were buried, we'd be finding their bones, because that's why we bury, our dead, is to protect the bones and stuff like that. So if somebody gets attacked by a predator or dies for hypothermia or something else in the woods. You know, that's why, oh, we found his vest, or we found his shoe, but we haven't found the rest of him. Where is he? Well, hypothermia can make people actually strip because they think they're, number one, they think they're warm and not cold. Number two is if they end up dying or passing out, predators, doesn't take long for predators to go, hey, lunch, something to eat. And that body soon disappears. And, you know, they put a deer carcass on a body farm. And that deer, you could tell that deer was, you know, you could not tell that deer was there within 14 days because every single predator had gotten a piece of it. You know, you have, raccoons and coyotes and wolves. They'll eat bone, or even there, they'll eat bones, and they'll eat organs and soft tissue. So what's left? And then you have insect infestation and all that other stuff. So it's no great surprise to me that, you know, people have turned up missing, not just in national parks, but everywhere. I mean, we have a state park that was also featured on 411 up in Lily Pond in Warren County, New York, which is maybe about 40, 50 miles from where I live. But these are dangerous. That's the reason why, you know, you asked me what's the best thing I can suggest to people going out in the woods is be safe, because the woods are a tough place to be. You can disappear yourself real quick. It took them how many months to find Julian Sands, who, you know, apparently died of hypothermia in Washington State, you know, and they had a really big search going for him. So it doesn't take much for a body to disappear in the forest. So I would say, unless there is some corroborative evidence other than just a history of Bigfoot sightings or UFO sightings for that matter, again, primates of one species rarely attack primates of other. And if they're not using them for a food source, which I doubt they are, otherwise they'd be eating us and we'd be much more well known. You know, I think it's just, you know, coincidence that a Bigfoot, you know, and it's not really much of a coincidence, because if you think about it, Bigfoot are seen just about everywhere there's people in forests in the United States.
Exactly. So what else can you tell me? What else would you like to share?
One thing I always like to share is people get so hot with some of the videos that come out and think that the Bigfoot videos are, and I have a quick little spiel on how to determine if a Bigfoot video is real or not. And my biggest determinant is, how long is that video? That video just like a 15-second clip and that's it. Well, that's strike one, because, you know, it's almost as if you think about it, if somebody's videotaping and they catch one, that's one thing. But the mind acts really different when you see a Bigfoot and you don't expect a Bigfoot to be in that system. You're not thinking about cameras. You're not thinking about anything else. You're looking at that Bigfoot going, what am I looking at? And your mind is trying to process it, because the Bigfoot's not in your catalog. It's going to try to figure out what you're looking at, which is why there's a delay, which can also explain some of the other paranormal aspects that I discussed earlier. So if you see a video that, you know, all of a sudden you think this person just whipped out and they're like, oh, look, it's a Sasquatch, and they have a very light timbre, and they're like, one of the videos I saw on Fact or Fake was this guy trying to show a video to his kid of a Bigfoot peeking around a tree. And he's like, oh, look, there's a Bigfoot. No, psychologically, that makes no sense at all. You're seeing a tall, upright, bipedal predator. You're not going to sit there and go, oh, just like you see a bobcat or a bear in the woods. You think he's going to put his arm around the sun. Oh, look at the bear. Let's take a video with a bear. No, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to go, get behind me. Keep an eye on this. Let's get out of here. That's what's naturally going to happen, especially if you have children in the video. So there's a lot of videos that psychologically make no sense. Some of the videos that do make sense is ones that have, you know, a lot of video before, a lot of video even afterwards, where they're looking for tracks, or they're talking about it or some sort. There's just and then of course you have the videos where there's no story at all. Here's a Bigfoot, guy said he saw it running in a field. Well, where was it? What time was it? What day of the week was it? Why are all these facts being hidden? Why is the clip only 10 seconds long? So you got to look at all those factors. To me, there is a lot more involved in the story of a video than the video itself, because let's face it, if, you know, unless it's really poorly done CGI, which there are a few out there, you're going to have a real hard time trying to figure out how this video was made, whether it's a suit or not. The easiest way to determine whether or not a video is real is look at the facts of the case and look at the facts surrounding it. One of the first things we do in criminal investigation is what we call victimology. And victimology is where, you're looking at a victim's background, associations, their history and stuff like that. Well, if somebody takes a Bigfoot video, that person in the scope of the investigation is the victim. So the first thing you need to do is look in the background of this victim. You know how many times, in fact, I'm going to be breaking a video here real soon about a Bigfoot sighting that got a lot of attention, and a lot of people have given it a pass, saying, hey, this could be real. Well, guess what? If you look at their history, they have a Bigfoot costume in one of their videos, a Bigfoot costume. And coincidentally, that Bigfoot video has disappeared from their playlists, but not before somebody quickly got a screen cap of it. So you look at that, that's part of victimology, looking at that person's past history. And there's a lot of times you look at somebody's past history and saying, hey, you know what? They did this like a year and a half ago with a really poorly done, or they've tried, doing this. Or, in one instance, a guy set a website up for his Bigfoot video a month before he did the Bigfoot video, saying, oh, look, I saw Nobby. And then, but wait, Nobby lives, the website that was created like 3 weeks before you film this. What, that's some pretty good, psychic forethought there. So
what do you think of the Patterson-Gimlin film?
I've always said I'm leaning towards it's real. Some of the physical aspects of the film and broken down are amazing. I like the fact that there was video before and after. I like the fact that there's a story and a long story to it. And it's not a fly-by-night video that you see. Are there some inconsistencies over the years? There are. But, it has to be really relayed on, is it because of the retelling over many years by a man who is now, at the time he was telling a lot of stories in the 70s and 80s where the memory necessarily isn't as good, and that certain aspects may have changed over time, which occurs naturally anyway. I mean, if I was asked to describe, was my description of my sighting in 2011 the same as it is today? I try to keep it real. I try not to embellish it, but I'm trying to remember more detail from it to enhance the story a bit. Let me change that, not to enhance it, but to be more descriptive of the story. So that kind of, but over time, distant spatial relationships, even sometimes sequence of events can be very messed up. I'll never forget, and this happened. I'll never forget running into my martial arts instructor, who when I was talking to him, it had been about 20 years difference in talking to him, and I still remember that first move you taught me. In fact, the funny thing is I actually have that move on video. He couldn't remember it. He's like, no, that's not the way to do it. I go, yeah, it is. But he had been out of that particular system for about 15 years himself. So he completely forgot the move. That was the only system I was used to. So I remembered the move, but he had completely forgotten it or had a variation of it. And hence you can see how sometimes the truth over time can take its own twist and turn. So it's really hard to decipher what the real story is unless you start. Now, there have been times when there's people like, the gentleman by the name of Bob Hieronymus, and there was another guy who passed away, Philip Morris. And there was an author, Greg Long, who tried to put together this big conspiracy theory using, well, Morris made the suit. Hieronymus was the guy, but Hieronymus and Morris never did describe the same suit. One said it was 5 pieces. Another one said it was 4 pieces. One said it was made of this. The other one said it was made of that. But the author of the book, of course, had a clear bias to, let me come back. The author of the book clearly had a bias towards the film being fake because he heard a couple of rumors from people saying, oh, I got that Roger Patterson was like that, and that spun him up. He expected everybody to be like, but we all know that no matter what field you're in, if you have the pinnacle of something, there's going to be somebody there kicking you or not trying to knock you down because of who you are. So is that the case? And that kind of spun Long's idea, like, well, these people don't like him. I thought everybody would have liked him. Maybe there's something to this. And now he starts looking for holes instead of letting the holes naturally. Now, truthfully, I look for holes too. But then again, he ran into this Bob Hieronymus guy. I mean, he's not a man. He's not a forensic interviewer. And already I knew there was something with Hieronymus' story, because at the beginning he told one story like, oh, the only person I showed was, my mother and another family member back at the house. And 3 months later, that changed to, well, I took it by the bar at first and I showed everybody. I kept it in the trunk of my car. Oh, you want to see this? Look in the trunk of my car. Like, something sounds really stupid about that. And, if you did that, why didn't you say that 3 months ago? He's embellishing, or he's doing something to the story, which to me tells me that the fact that he's not telling the truth. And it's based on a sequence of events or major parts. Again, I never try to base my reasoning, or an investigator never should, based on spatial relationships or time, even sometimes, because time and space can change, depending on your mood of the day, or depending on your memory. Like, how far was that? I mean, I'm horrible with measurements sometimes myself.
Okay. Anything else you want? I'm getting ready to wrap up the interview. It's been good.
Nope, I think that's it. You can catch me all Sunday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern on Squatch TV.